Howdy y'all, Fast Forward 289, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be working on my 1976 Ford truck, and we're going to be switching out the rear end gears. I got some gears from a buddy of mine, and we're going from a 300 gear to a 350 gear, and also a limited slip center section, as well as converting from 28 spline axles to 31 spline axles. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into it. We're gonna crawl up underneath the truck, get the drive shaft out, start taking it apart and disassembling it and getting into it. So let's get started. All right, so once you're underneath the vehicle, you're gonna remove your U-joint bolts. They're 1/2 inch. Don't forget to take the lock washers off. Pull your U-bolts out. Just take your drive shaft, slide it forward, and move it out of the way. All right, now take your drum off. You may have to go in the back and loosen the brakes if they're set kind of tight, but usually you can just turn them like that and they'll come right off. All right, now if you look, you can see you got this hole in the axle and there's a nut right here. You got 4 of these. You just turn this and line up with every bolt. There's 4 of them. See, there's one there. And you just turn it until you line them up. Take all 4 of those out and then the axle will slide out. All right, I'm gonna go through and pull all 4 of these out. These are 3/4. You might want to put your hand on the back. There's like a T-bolt back there. You want to hold it. All right, now once you got all 4 of them out, make sure your backing plate stays as good as you can. Just take the axle and grab it. And you may need a puller, a slide hammer, if they're being stuck for a long time. All right, so once you got your slide hammer on here, just use some of your lug bolts to tighten the fork down. And then you just take it and just... And as you do it, make sure your backing plate stays back. And now your axle's out. You just simply slide your axle out like so. And you're good to go. All right, so on these 31 spline axles, they use a tapered bearing like this. The most traditional axles that you normally would see, like a 28 spline or 8-inch Ford rear end, which also a 28 spline, is this sealed bearing. But these 31 splines are specific to these tapered bearings, which is actually better for load carrying capacity. And these go on, they use a special seal. Instead of the seal being up inside the housing, the seal actually is on here like this. It stays on the axle. And they go together like this. You can see how this bearing is made, where it's stepped. And this just sits over like that. And when you install it into and it go on the axle like this. When you install it into the truck, this acts almost like a crush washer to take up the to give the bearing the proper preload, because taper bearings need a preload. And you tighten this down, it crushes it like a crush washer kind of, and gives it the proper preload. So all you gotta do is you press these on like normal. I got another video on my channel of me showing you how to press bearings on to an axle. It's the same process for these or for these. It's just on these, you gotta make sure you get the taper bearing and install it the right way, which would be like this. Also, real quick, I forgot to mention, I also like to put a little bit of lubricant on here on where to make sure this is a clean surface. I use a little bit of gear oil for whatever oil I'm going to be putting inside the rear end. Apply on the bearing surface and where the seal is going to ride. And also put some on the seal itself too. Also note, make sure you got your retainer plate on the right way. You see how it's made with this groove in here, and that's for this seal to set into. The other side sticks up, so it only go on one way. All right, so on a 4 9-inch and 8-inch, you got 9/16 bolts. You gotta go around and get all these 9/16 bolts all the way around. Also, if yours has never been removed, you have copper washers, and if it has been removed, somebody may have just put them back. But this has never been removed. It's got copper washers. You got to pry and get them off, break them off, do whatever you gotta do. On a 4 9-inch, you cannot get a socket to this one. A socket will not go straight onto it. You have to use a wrench on this one. The rest of them, Or maybe it might be this one, actually. It might be that one, actually, I'm thinking of. But I know there's one bolt you can't get a socket on. You got to use a wrench for one of them. The rest of them, you get a socket on and go around and take them loose, and it'll come right out. Also, you may have to clean up your area. I already cleaned this up with some carburetor cleaner and a wire brush and scraped all this. Was caked in all kinds of dirt. I've already cleaned all this up, so we're good to go. Go around, pull all those out, and then we'll go to the next step. All right, once you've got all your bolts taken out, I leave a couple in to hold it while I pry this away to get it to drain so it don't just fall out. You're gonna wanna push it back in, take your nuts out, and be very careful. These are very, very heavy, especially with the awkward angle that you have to be at to pull this out. Make sure you don't drop it on your head, because trust me, it won't feel good. Okay, now once you got the hog head out, now you can go through and get the gasket off here, clean it up. You're gonna get the leftover oil. It's gathered up here in the bottom. I like to just push it out. I'll get a glove on and push out most of it and catch it in a bucket like that. And then I'll take a rag and just wipe it out with some carburetor cleaner and clean it really good. Get as much oil out as possible. And once it's all cleaned up, you can use a scraper, razor blade, whatever you need. Get the gasket off, make sure it's clean to bare metal, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, so real quick little lesson here. You got your tag on your rear end. I went and cleaned this one up. This is the original tag to my 76 Ford truck. This is what came out from the factory. And how you read one of these is, you crawl up underneath there, this is your gear ratio right here. So like mine had a 300, so it says 3.00. If it was a 355, it'd be 3.55, and so on and so forth. Also, if you had a limited slip, it would be 3.00L. It'd have an L next to it. And that's how you would read it. The 9 stands for 9-inch. Now, when it comes to the rest of these, I don't really know what these are for, to be honest with you. I could look it up and learn it, because I've read them before, but I don't remember. But the main important ones you need to know when you want to know what you got is the gear ratio here, and then what it is, an 8 or 9-inch. Now, I'm actually going to put this back with the 355s I'm putting in. The reason being is, even though it ain't a 355 gear anymore, I'm putting it back just because this truck's a lot of original, and that's why I'm not going to get rid of my original gears. I'll keep them. And I'm going to put this back on the truck just so then, for one, I don't lose it, and for two, because it goes with the truck. So, but I don't know what it is. But anyway, that's a quick little lesson on that. All right, now I want to show y'all the difference. This is the 28 spline, and you can see how thin this ring gear is. Here's the 31 spline, and you can see how much thicker it is. This is another thing that adds to the heavy duty factor on these 31 spline housings. You know, they're a lot thicker. And when you compare the two, you can see them side by side. There is a pretty big difference. Okay, so one thing we need to do, we need to clean all this up. We're gonna clean this up, get the grease out of here, take some sandpaper and sand this down a little bit. Also gotta pull that old seal out. You could try a slide hammer on the seal, a seal puller. If that don't work, you may have to get a chisel and come up in here and come up to the side and dent it on each side, and then it'll pop out to just break it free. All right, so first I'm gonna try one of these pullers. It's on a slide hammer here. It may work, it may not. This one just go right here on the edge of this and give it a few whacks. Okay, now I already went ahead and cleaned this up. I finally got that seal out. I had to work out a little bit, but I got it out. And then took some sandpaper, cleaned all this up, carburetor cleaner on a rag, wiped everything down. Now, if you have a 28 spline and you're gonna keep a 28 spline, you go ahead and install your seal in here. Drive it in with a seal. If you want to see how to do that, I got a video on how to remove and replace axle bearings and seals on a Ford 8-inch, 9-inch rear end. So you can go look at that if you want to see how to install them. Since I got a 31 spline, it stays on the axle. So Now we can crawl underneath the truck and start putting the hog head in. All right, now as you can see, I got all this cleaned up. I took some sandpaper, cleaned all this, carburetor cleaner and a rag, wiped everything down, got all the grease off of it. I cleaned inside here really good. I'm gonna get as much oil out as possible and clean it really well. That way you can just start fresh. So, and if you have to, you can go through and tap your studs. I didn't because they're fine, but you can go through and tap your studs if you want to. Make sure they're good to go. And then we're going to get the gasket ready and put it on. Okay, so this is a 4 9-inch gasket here. The 8 inches look similar, just not as big. And this is a paper gasket. In all honesty, what I wished I had done, looking back on it, is you can buy what they call a lube blocker gasket from Quick Performance. And it's a rubber gasket with it uses no silicone, no sealant of any kind. It has lines in it, and it will compress whenever you torque it down, and it'll seal it. That's what I put in my 68 Fairlane, and it's nice because you don't have to worry about no RTV or anything like that. But when I bought this, I didn't know about them at the time. I've had this for a while, so I'm going to go ahead and just use it because I already got it. You want to use some kind of a sealant. Some people use weather strip adhesive. I don't like it because it's really messy. This is messy too, but you use whatever you want. But this is what I use. I like to use the Permatex Ultra Black Gasket Maker Oil Resistant RTV. And using this, it's a sealant. So you apply it to both sides. And I like to cover both. Some people don't even use a gasket. You can go, imagine this is the housing on the very end. Some people will take the RTV and just put a circle around each bolt and then connect the dots pretty much and make one line around it, run a bead. And they put the housing there and torque it down. And that's fine if you want to do it that way. It's up to you. But I like to use the gasket. It's really self-assuring to know that it's sealed. It's not hard to change the gears in these 9 inches, but I don't want to have to take it back apart if I don't have to. So, use the paper gasket. I like to coat the entire side all the way around on both sides with RTV. I will coat it on both sides really good, and then we'll stick it up to the housing, and then put the rear end up there. All right, so this is what it should look like. You got a nice good coat all the way around, and the other side looks just like that. Go ahead and put it up on the housing because it's easier, the studs will hold it. And you'll know which way it goes. It will not go but one way on here. So you'll know whenever you go to put it up here, which way it goes. Also, make sure the surface of your hog head is clean. It's very crucial that your mating surfaces are clean so that you don't have a leak. Okay, so here's a good look at what it looks like installed. You can see the RTV oozing out, so we know we got a good seal. Also, if you look, you notice I don't reuse the copper washers. I never do. As long as you got a good gasket, like a lube blocker gasket, or you use RTV in a gasket, it ain't gonna leak. You'll be good to go. So one thing I like to do is, since this is a tapered bearing and it's open, before I ever put it in the axle, I want to make sure that it's got some oil in it already to pre-lube it, kind of. Almost like primer. So I'll just take my bottle of whatever gear oil I'm gonna put in it and go around it and just coat it like that. You can take the leftover and rub on this seal down here. As you can see, I've got that rubber right there that goes against the housing. Rub it all the way around on the seal so it'll slide in easy. And now we're ready to install it in the housing. All right, now we're ready to install it. Also, one thing I wanted to mention is if you look on this lip here, on the retainer ring, you see you got this little notch right here. That goes down on the rear end. We're gonna install our axle. You may have to bump it a little bit to get it to go, like so. Line your backing plate up with your retainer ring, and you can start putting your nuts in and tighten it down. All right, once you get all 4 of your nuts started, you want to go back through and run them down. After that, I'll come back with my hand ratchet and just go through and make sure they're good and tight. Even though that should have tightened them pretty good, I want to make sure they're good and tight. Okay, once you went through and tightened them, now one thing I will say, this is one thing I do like about the tapered bearing. Remember I told you it has that crushed seal to take up make the preload. On a regular sealed bearing, sometimes, when the axle will move in and out easy, sometimes, you can, after it's bolted down, you can move it in and out just a little bit, that little bit of play. With these, having that taper bearing, there is absolutely no give at all. It's a lot smoother operation too as it's rolling. So I like that about it. All right, once you get that done, we can crawl underneath the truck, fill it up with gear oil. I'll put your drum and everything back on, and then tighten your wheel down, fill it up with gear oil, and it's time to test drive. What I'm going to be using is this Castrol Axle Limited Slip 80W90 gear oil, because this is a limited slip unit that I'm putting into my truck. If you got just a basic open differential, you don't need this. You can use 80-90 gear oil or 75, 80, whatever it is you want to use. But since this is limited slip, this is what I'm going to be using for this. All right, so when you want to go fill this up, you want to fill it up till it starts dripping out like that. I went ahead and filled it up to save y'all from watching me, but I'm going to go ahead and show you, like, when you put it in, this is what it's going to look like. Put the bottle in, you squeeze it, you'll see it come out on a pretty heavy run, like pretty steady stream. Regardless, once it starts running out like that, you know that it's full. Wipe it down. And you should see fluid start to run back out. Okay, now you know it's full. Take your plug. I put a little bit of Teflon tape on it just to help seal it even better. And I'll screw it in there and tighten it down. All right, real quick, another thing, when you change your gears, if you got an automatic transmission, you're going to have to adjust your modulator valve, which is how you adjust your shift points. Since I'm going from a higher gear to a lower gear, it's going to shift really quick. So how you adjust it is, you unplug your vacuum line, you just pull it straight off. Inside there is a screw, a tiny screw. You turn it clockwise to make it shift later, counterclockwise to make it shift sooner. I'm going to go ahead and probably you usually want to turn them about a quarter of a turn at a time to adjust them, but since I'm going pretty much half a gear ratio lower, I'm probably going to give it one full turn and maybe even a turn and a half and try that and see how that goes. Alrighty guys, that worked out so great. I am very happy with how this turned out, and actually as a quick note, to give you kind of a quick little story. Okay, so I'm kind of surprised in how changing the gears didn't really change that much. Now I can tell a difference on takeoff. It does pull harder, which is what I wanted. I wanted a lower gear because it give me a better takeoff where I don't have to have as much gas to pull off, so just give it a little bit more torque, a little bit more power. But I adjusted my modulator valve a full turn. When I went to go drive the truck, it would not shift at all, period. I had to manual shift it. And even going into drive, it would go back to first gear. So I stopped, I pulled over, I stopped, crawled up underneath the truck, turned it half a turn back out, went and drove it again. Still would not shift, same exact thing. I went and turned it another half back out. So it ended up being exactly where it was before my 300 gear, and it shifts perfect. How? I'm not exactly quite sure. It's kind of weird to me because usually when you change it, you're going to change your shifter points, but it works perfect where it's at. So I'm not going to mess with it. It works fine. So it shifts like it's supposed to, and actually shifts harder than it did before, which I kind of like. But that was kind of weird. But also, I guess because I'm not changing drastically. I went from a 300 to a 350. So when you turn the yoke to make one full revolution, you turn the yoke three full turns to make one full revolution on the ring gear. Well, with a 350 gear, you only turn the yoke half a turn more. So it's not like a big drastic difference, really. So I guess that's why the shifting points didn't really change. If you switch from a 275 to a 350, I'm pretty positive you're going to have to adjust your shift points because you're talking about changing a 3/4 of a gear ratio. Okay, so it is going to be quite different. Okay, so that's one thing. Also, as far as driving it, I actually think when I put these in, I thought initially when I was putting them in, I weren't quite sure if I was going to like it. I thought maybe it might be too low. But surprisingly enough, I think actually I'm running less RPM. I don't have a tax. I can't do like a before and after and tell you exactly what I was running before, what I was running now. But I think by driving it, because I know the truck, I know how it feels, I know how it sounds going down the road. And I think that I'm actually running less RPMs now with a lower gear than I was with the 300 gear, which is great. That's even better because it's not winding up going down the road running 50 miles an hour. It's fine. It just cruises right on down the road, straight on down the road. Good. You can't really tell. It's not like that big of a difference. I'm kind of surprised on that. And it don't take much gas to go down the road. I barely got my foot on the gas going down the road at like 50 miles an hour. So that's really good. I think one thing that helps though is it's such a heavy truck. You know, the heavier the vehicle, the lower the gear you're better off with, because it'll carry it better. And since the truck is so heavy, that's probably why it carries it so well. The motor's not having to work as hard. The transmission's not having to work as hard to pull it. Also, this motor, I built this motor. The cam I got in here is an Extreme Energy Comp Cams 262 hydraulic flat tappet. And in that description, it tells you the operating RPM is 1,300 to 5,600 RPMs, and it says stock converter okay, which this is a stock converter, and it also says 325 or lower gear recommended, or best with 325 or lower gear. So now I got a 350 gear, and that also I think really helps also with my application. If it was a stock motor, it might run a little different, I don't know. But since it's got a higher compression, it's got 9-to-1 flat tops, it's got the cam that I told you about, and that's really the only modifications I did to it. It's still a 2-barrel and all. So, but the cam does make a difference, and that will help. So I think that's part of the reason why it carries it so well. But anyway, it works great. I'm very happy with it. I thought when I put them in, like I said, I weren't sure if I was going to like them. I thought maybe it might be too low, but it's actually perfect for this truck. So I'm going to leave them in there. I'm not going to change it. I thought if I didn't like it, I would just order another gear set. You know, I'm going to keep it a 31 spline since it's a 31 spline already. You know, this truck, it don't need a 31 spline. I don't do a bunch of pulling, a bunch of hauling, but if I got it, why not put it in here? And if I have it, why not keep it, right? So now I got a 31 spline. I've upgraded it, making it stronger. Okay, so I was going to just order another gear set for 31 spline if I didn't like the 350s, but I like the 350s. They work very well for this. You know, very good. I'm very pleased and very happy with how it turned out. So, that's it. It's very simple changing gears in a Ford 8-inch, 9-inch. They're very simple. It does take a little bit of work if they've never been changed, because you got to figure this stuff's stuck. You know, it's stuck for almost 50 years. You're going to have a little bit of rust holding it. You're going to have the gasket super glued to the rear end. And it took me a while to clean it, and clean it really good like you've seen it in the video. So you got to take your time, make sure it is clean. I cannot stress that enough. Make sure your surfaces are clean, because if they are not, you could potentially have a leak. Then you got to tear it all back apart and do it all over again. It's worth taking the extra time. It could be a little bit of a headache sometimes sitting there, especially having to lay on your back doing it. But trust me, in the long run, you'll be glad you took the extra time to clean it. Anyway, if y'all like the video, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. I'd appreciate that as well. And as always, I appreciate y'all for watching. I really do. Thank y'all for watching each and every day, each and every video. And as always, I will see y'all on the next one. Take care.